Welcome back to the Backseat Startup Podcast, where we give unsolicited advice to strangers on the internet.
Today I'm joined by Jason Sharp, founder of Umi. Jason, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Can you share a little bit about your background and how you came to start Umi?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was in college, I studied abroad, and like many people, I had already taken a bunch of language classes before going abroad, multiple years of Spanish, and then I took some Mandarin. When I got abroad into China, so I studied abroad in Beijing, I realized, even the most basic conversations were really difficult for me. And this was like a common story with everybody. It's like, wow, these years of school didn't actually do anything. I wasn't very prepared. But while I was there, I came across a method, basically like mass watching TV shows and movies. This was just because I was really interested, but it turned out that it was really effective. By the end of the year, I went from being one of the lowest level students to being the highest level students, passing, skipping multiple grades in years. And this was just from, entertainment basically. And this was a common story that I found with a lot of people, is that the classroom knowledge and things that you learn don't actually end up being useful in a practical situation. So what Umi's trying to solve is kind of this problem, is we're going straight to the source. So Umi's learning with TV shows and movies and kind of like binge watching in our app, and then we teach you what everyone's saying. Yeah, so that's kind of like how it came about. I've also learned Japanese on the side, and I actually used only this process without traveling to Japan. And within like just an hour a day of about 3 years, although at about 2 years, I was already being able to have conversations with people of just watching Netflix and like pausing and looking things up. But this is really, really hard for most people to do, so we were making like kind of like super easy to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love it. If you're anything like me, who's tried a dozen times to pick up a language, go check out Umi. By the time this launches, we'll have just featured them, so go check out the features by Startup Founder Daily. But Jason, so glad to have you here. This is the show where we give unsolicited advice to strangers on the internet. So we will head over to Reddit, find a question posed by a founder, and you and I will break it down.
I love giving unsolicited advice, absolutely.
And now you get to do it with an audience.
Great. Although I already do this on Reddit myself with just like commenting to people, so we'll see what question it comes up. Well, let's probably scroll past this first one. Maybe a better question for VCs.
Yes, that's right.
Ads are fun. Okay, another question. Need advice on 1% equity for a startup without funding? That's not a bad question. I think like equity in startups is an interesting question. Unpaid work for 4 months. Oh no, that's a bad situation.
Yeah, let's jump in here. Do you want to give your thoughts here?
Which one? The need advice on 1% equity? Yeah.
Or which one sounds more fun to you?
We can start with the 1% equity one. Yeah, that sounds
All
good.
right.
I think it's a really cool
Great.
topic
Sounds
to
good.
talk about, and there might be a lot of different opinions out there on giving out equity, especially early stage.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it looks like it's referencing an original post, so if we need that for context, I'll jump in there as well. But I will read this for the sake of the listeners. So this is titled, Update to Need Advice on 1% Equity for Startup Without Funding. Yeah, we're going to need the original post. So let's jump into the original post. And, it's a long one. Great. Okay. I will read this one. So the title is Need Advice on 1% Equity for a Startup Without Funding. I've been working with a group of 4 on a startup in tech for the past 3 months. The CEO, who has limited experience in managing operations, normally he invests in companies, has promised 1% equity in the company. However, we're currently not backed by any VCs and there's no paperwork to confirm my ownership. Yikes. I'll keep going. He has mentioned that I will receive the share. He has mentioned that I will receive the share purchase agreement this Friday, but I feel like I'm getting stuffed. The company is in tech, can't specifically state the area of tech, and relies heavily on myself for the software side of things, as well as DevOps, etc. The CEO is an investor in some fairly large public companies and some smaller startups, and sees this as his chance to create something himself. He has said that he will hire a CEO with significant experience later down the line. Despite my repeated requests for assistance with the UX, UI, and content writing, that's not what I'm here for, the CEO insists that I continue working on the application as he believes that everything will fall into place. I'd be more motivated to work on the application if I've seen the application developing in different directions outside of my own efforts. Even when trying to renegotiate my equity, as I believe I contribute a lot to the startup, I was met with heavy resistance in the answer, the reason why I cannot give you more than 1% is because we will eventually bring in private equity. I'm feeling drained and undervalued, especially since I've invested so much of my time into building the MVP without any help. I trusted the CEO and have known him for a while, but at this point it seems completely out of order. Am I getting a bad deal here? What's a fair expectation of equity when building out the core of what the company would rely on for years to come? The only reason I've hung on for so long is because I know the company would get funded if we went ahead with it. But at this point, given the equity deal, I'm probably buying myself a job. I've built a lot of the application already. The only thing I have signed is an NDA. If I choose to pull out, what are my options with the application? Legally, he can't take it from me and use the code that I've written, as I haven't signed anything. Wow, this is a gold mine. All right, initial thoughts. Let's hear them.
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, this is super common. You'd be surprised how often I see this problem. The problem's basically getting into a partnership with somebody without, in the beginning, talking about and signing exactly what that partnership means. That's the first problem. Before you ever start working on anything, you need to get a partnership agreement going. And honestly, like for my startup right now, before we started, we said, okay, what are the expectations? What's the ownership? Who's going to be responsible for what? What are we getting ourselves into here, right? So that's the very first red flag here, is that before starting, and this is 3 months in, but the second thing is he sounds like he's the CTO. Okay, I don't know, we might be missing information here, but is he being paid for this work? If he's getting paid and he's like a good salary, like it has to be like market rate salary, then maybe 1% equity might not really matter at all. You're an employee, you're getting paid market rate salary. But my guess, reading between the lines, is this is either a non-paid position or it's much below market salary, or for this promise of a 1% equity. So that's the next thing. It's like, well, what is the situation here? Now, if it's a non-paid or an underpaid position, 1% is far too little for a CTO position. Like CTO, maybe it's not 50-50 depending on what everyone's bringing to the table and experience and things, but it's going to be closer to like a 45% or a 35%, maybe 30%, depending on the business. Is he bringing in huge deals with giant corporations out the get-go and you guys are going to be profitable from day one? Okay, maybe it's like a much smaller percent, but it's still never 1%. So these are like my initial thoughts here. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, so I was wrestling with a few things. Like, first of all, it seems incredibly early. So like you said, it kind of struck me that this user is like a co-founder and 1% is ridiculous. And then I started thinking, maybe the CEO has no intention of keeping him on post like this initial build, and it's kind of like a contractor, work for equity kind of thing. But it's such a disaster to not have that paperwork out ahead of time or have those conversations out ahead of time. And if you're relying for somebody, and it sounds like they're doing like the entire build, like you said, 1% is far, far too low. Like you said, we don't know much if there's salary on the side, what the other dynamics are here, but had a lot of red flags go up here. And then I don't mean to jump to the end, but if there's no like contracts in place of any kind, I think the user's right. I mean, I don't mean to put my lawyer hat on, but like code is copyright, and when you put it in a tangible medium, you have that copyright. It's just mind-boggling to me that the CEO doesn't at least have like a IP transfer agreement here.
That is such a good point, that it's actually like CEO is an investor, but he's not really thinking either as an owner, like, hey, I need to own this code, our business needs to own this code. He's maybe just looking to take advantage and move really quickly. But the other thing is like, if you're thinking about moving quickly, you should also be thinking about launching quickly, but it's like 3 months of working on something. He's talking about, I'm building something that's going to be used for this company for years. It's not a typical startup. Like, startup is build quickly, see if users want it, and then iterate. You're not building a scalable solution for years to come. There's just so many problems with this, but you're right. I think he's got a very good bargaining position here. He's like, look, I built it all. if you don't give me what we had talked about, verbally, then I'm just going to take the code and move on. Although, is the code going to be useful for this person? It's very questionable, but at least he's got a bargaining chip.
Yeah, absolutely. I was also curious when they brought up that the justification for keeping them at 1% is the role of private equity. And maybe I don't have the broadest perspective, but I just don't think private equity is very active in brand new apps. And it almost sounds like they're looking for a quick acquisition, which in that case, the acquirers don't really typically care about how sloppy your cap table is. They're buying it outright. So what did you think about that?
It sounds to me like he's saying, we're going to bring in big investors and I need to give them equity. That's what it sounds like to me. But that's not a good argument, because there's still a ton of work to convince investors that they need to come on board. And it's just common that, everyone dilutes. And is the CEO not diluting? This argument sounds like, I can't give it to you because I need to give it to somebody else. What? First of all, private equity is not going to want 1% or 0.5%. They're going to want 20%, maybe 10 to 20, or maybe 25% of your company. It needs to be a significant chunk for them to, it makes sense. So this is a terrible argument, and honestly, it feels like a bad situation. If it were me, I would probably just pull out at this point. Although I'd have a hard conversation with them first to see if it's possible to work together. But there's too many red flags here working with this person that I think it's really hard to say you'd ever want to continue.
Yeah, as you were saying that, it dawned on me that it might be not capital P, capital E private equity. They're just talking about private capital, more traditional VC. But exactly right. That's a bogus argument. I mean, especially because when companies get off the ground, it's pretty common for 4 co-founders to have all substantial equity. And especially if they're functioning as a CTO, like you said, you see numbers in the 40s, if not 50. So yeah, not a great explanation. Maybe it goes back to what I was saying, that he has no intention of keeping this user on beyond the initial build. And, there's a lot of service for equity type models, but that's something you need to plan for and negotiate way ahead of time. And you don't want to be in business with somebody that keeps you in the dark and doesn't formally document things. And this just seems like one red flag after the other.
Totally agree. Very curious on the update here. Looks like...
Yeah, do you want to jump into the update? Great.
Yeah.
All right, update. So... since then, I reapproached the CEO of the project and asked for more equity, justifying it with the amount of work and dedication I had put into the project. Long story short, after giving him the options to purchase the code, give me a small amount of equity and a market rate salary, okay, that might answer your question, or a larger amount of equity and a founding role, nothing came to fruition. I was offered XX% of a subsidiary, a UK company, instead of the whole setup, only 1% overall. Essentially, if he chose not to go into the UK market, I'd still be left with the same deal. I declined and said there are 2 other options there. You can purchase my code or give me a market rate salary, to which he completely ruled out. So I pulled my code. I was then told by him that this was extortion and that he'd be having our in-house counsel file legal action against me, criminal charges in the UK. Unreal situation. Just why? All right, I think I'm more confused than when we started. What size company do you think this is? They have an in-house legal department before they have an app. I'm not quite sure what's going on.
Information. Yeah, it sounds like this is part of a larger company deal in some way, and he's building an app. But then why doesn't he have a salary? There's just too many get out, man. You're not gonna he can't sue you. There's no agreement in place. You're gonna win. Just get out.
Yeah. I stumbled over the line in the middle explaining the whole situation. So it sounds like what the CEO offered was, if we form a subsidiary, you will have a part of it. But that's in no way guaranteed. And then it's, sticking with the 1% of the current entity that they're talking about. Not legal advice, but no, he has no he has no grounds for suing you. There's no actionable thing here. This is wild. Yeah, this is one of the strangest stories I've seen on r/startups.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it is really wild. Like, it's like, I want you to basically build this thing for free with no guarantee of any payout whatsoever. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I do see a lot of situations that people get themselves into that are pretty bad. It's pretty common to not sign things or talk about agreements and then not get paid later. I mean, honestly, like, I've seen it a lot. So it's sad to say there needs to be maybe some better education out there for people to say, hey, look, you need to agree on things. Here's what you deserve. Like, a lot of people don't quite know, and that's why they're here on Reddit. So, sad.
Completely agree. I think, startups love to jump in and go fast, and that's what we love about it. But, cover your bases. Start with strong corporate hygiene. You need to start with contracts in place, a solid formal understanding of your role and what that role means in terms of equity and ownership and salary and all those sorts of things. So don't go into business with people you can't trust. Don't go into business with people that keep you in the dark. I'm glad that it sounds like this user is pulling out. You wrote the code. I don't see any situation why you don't get to keep that code and they have any reason to come after you. But sorry that this has happened, but hopefully it's an awesome app and you can run with it and make something of it.
Yeah, that would be cool. I hope so too.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts for this user?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think what we've talked about is basically enough. I mean, he sounds like, he's kind of like a head down, focus and working situation. Just pay a little bit more attention to, use this as a learning opportunity. I've been in really bad situations, not quite this bad before, but also some pretty bad situations. Like, hey, look, I'm never gonna, let me pay attention a little bit more to how we structure things. What is my value here, and what should I be asking for? That's about it.
Yeah, this sounds cheesy, but like, know your worth. Like, non-technical founders can't do anything without the technical minds. Like, you put it together, understand that what you did is worth far more than 1%, and best wishes moving forward.
No salary is a big deal. You are basically paying this company, right, with like your potential earnings, and you could have had a job and made a lot of money during that time, and if you're foregoing that's worth something.
Yeah, for 3 months, right? Is that what the other
3
post
months.
said?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, well, for what it's worth, you're welcome for the unsolicited advice. Jason, thank you so much for being on the show. How can listeners connect with you?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on Twitter under SoulGlider42. Maybe you can post it when you feature me, but that's probably the best way to reach out to me.
Perfect. Well, once again, thank you so much for being on. It was a great conversation, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Have a good one.
The Backseat Startup Podcast is brought to you by Startup Founder Daily, a media company focused on early-stage companies. To learn more or apply to be featured for free, head over to startupfounderdaily.com. You can find the link in the description below.